Today, I want to talk about why rest doesn't always feel restful. Have you ever had a weekend where you technically rested, but somehow you still feel exhausted by the end of it all? Like maybe you slept in, watched some TV, stayed home, tried to do relaxing things, but your brain still feels tired. I think a lot of people experience this and immediately assume something is wrong with them. Like, why can't I recharge? Why am I still tired? Why doesn't rest seem to help me anymore? But honestly, rest and recovery are not the same thing. And I think that's something a lot of people are struggling with right now because a lot of us are physically stopping, but mentally, we never actually slow down. Even while you're resting, your brain may still be thinking, processing, anticipating, scrolling, problem solving, emotionally monitoring, or preparing for what might be next. So technically, your body is still, but your nervous system may still feel on. And over time, that catches up with people. I also think we've started confusing distraction with restoration. Like sometimes we say we're resting, but really we're just exhausted and collapsing at the end of the day. And there's a difference because not all rest actually helps your system recover. Sometimes we need less stimulation, not just less responsibility. And honestly, I notice this a lot with people who are high functioning, people who are constantly thinking, constantly managing things, constantly carrying mental load in the background. Even when nothing is actively wrong, their brain never fully powers down. If you're like me, you have 10 tabs open at any given time. So eventually, that can create this feeling where you're tired all the time, but you just can't fully relax. So almost like your body is exhausted, but your mind is still running. So if rest hasn't been feeling restful lately, there are a few things that genuinely tend to help. The first is, of course, reducing input. Not just stopping work, but actually giving your brain less to process. Because a lot of us go straight from stress to more stimulation. We're scrolling, we have on the TV, we're listening to a podcast, constant information. So our nervous system never really gets a break. I recently went up into the mountains in a cabin, and I think my favorite part of rest was literally sitting and doing nothing. I literally sat in front of the fire and just stared into it. No music, no movies, just rest. Sometimes that's what our brain needs. It doesn't need more distraction, it needs less input. Another thing that helps is slowing down before you try to rest. I think a lot of people go straight from functioning at full speed to suddenly expecting themselves to completely relax. But nervous systems usually tend to need a transition. A few years ago, I went with a friend of mine down to Cabo, and that was our goal. We're going to just sit and relax. It took me 2 full days for my brain to figure out I didn't need to be doing anything. Sitting by the pool and doing nothing is what I was supposed to be doing. But my brain was so used to being on all the time, it took a couple days for it to catch up. So, on a daily basis, even a few minutes of going outside, stretching, taking a walk, sitting quietly, taking a shower, listening to calm music, can help your body actually register that it's time to slow down. And one of the biggest things I see people overlook is their physical recovery. So things like sleep, hydration, movement, eating consistently, getting sunlight, and taking breaks before you hit complete exhaustion. Those things sound simple, but they really matter when your system has been under stress for a long time. And because our physical and our mental health are so interconnected, these basics are essential. For the getting sunlight, I like to call it being a lemur. So if you've ever watched anything about lemurs, sometimes they just sit in the sun with their arms open and their eyes closed. And that's the best. Sometimes I like to just step out the front door and do that for a few minutes. You'd be surprised how good that feels. I think another important shift is learning to notice the difference between avoiding and restoring. Because sometimes we think we're resting, but we're actually numbing, disconnecting, or just trying to mentally escape for a while. Real recovery usually leaves you feeling at least a little more present afterward, not just temporarily distracted. And if rest hasn't been working lately, it doesn't necessarily mean you're lazy or doing something wrong. Your system may just need a different kind of recovery than what you've been giving it. And honestly, I think a lot more people are experiencing this than they realize. If this resonated with you, let me know your comments. And if you want more conversations around burnout, nervous system health, whole person mental health, subscribe and follow along.